we're live again here for another episode of Whiskey Wednesday at Buffalo Trace Distillery. And man, oh man, looks like we got a heck of a lineup today. Joshua, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Joshua Steele. I'm the Marketing Director of Bourbon here at Buffalo Trace Distillery. And I am joined by Mr. Drew Mayville, our Master Blender. Drew, how you doing?
Great. Whiskey Wednesday, you can't be any better than that, right?
All right. So it might be our favorite time of year here at the distillery. It's BTAC season. And so we're going to go through our antique collection today. But before we do that, let's set the stage a little bit. So the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection is a collection of 5 whiskeys that are really meant to showcase what the distillery is all about. Now, we release these once a year, every year in the fall. It's a limited release, and every year it's fun because the whiskeys are a little bit different each and every year, so it's almost like having a vintage. And we actually introduced the antique collection back in the year 2000, and today the lineup's 5 expressions, but we actually launched it with just 3 expressions. Our Eagle Rare 17-year, our Sazerac 18-year, and then a 19-year-old Weller. So really excited to get into this. Drew, what's your favorite aspect of the antique collection?
A couple things, but just to expand on what you were saying, back in the late 90s, we found we had a lot of old whiskeys. And that's how it actually came to be, is that we had these 17, 18, 19-year-old whiskeys, and we put it out as a collection. And that's how it started, like you said. But at that time, you got to remember back in 2000, old whiskeys were not really known, especially for bourbon. Usually you had the 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. So that was quite a daring move. And initially it wasn't received that favorably. Over the years it definitely has, but it was because it was a new thing for the market. And you know the history since then. So.
Yeah, I think we launched these I want to say retail was something like $50 a bottle back then, which I think we were, as a company, was before my time. We were holding our breath. Will anyone pay $50 for a bottle of whiskey? And times how they've changed.
And then back then in 2005, see, I started back in 2004, so I was 3 issues since 2000 that I missed, but I've been here ever since. And 2005, we introduced the William Larue Weller. Mm-hmm. And then 2006, Thomas Handy, which is that one right there. So I've been part of some of it, but not the whole collection, but every year is exciting. And my Christmas starts early. You said we're excited in the fall. That's true. But for me, I start earlier, starting about March, where I start looking at each one and what barrels are available and actually put in to the final product. So my Christmas starts early.
There you go.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. But what really sets the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection apart is there is, to my knowledge, no other whiskey collection that's released annually that even comes close to these 5 products. The quality of the collection, fantastic, and individually each one is some of the best whiskey you'll ever taste in your whole life. The thing that we don't talk about a lot, but is the value of the quality of the products. So we suggest the retail price on these this year is $99. Fabulous price for the quality of the whiskey. So it's a great value. And then the next point is the history of these brands, and the names associated with these brands is phenomenal. Every time you taste that, you taste a little bit of that history, I think, at the same time. And also the variety of taste. Because of the different mash bills and proofs, you have a tremendous variety of tastes. And you can really explore and get lost in this in an evening if you have all 5 in front of you. And I think the last point is, this has encouraged us to experiment more. Because they are old whiskeys, or some of them are old whiskeys, we've been experimenting with our warehouse peat, which we talked about with E.H. Taylor a little bit last time. But we've been experimenting with aging whiskeys even longer because we've learned a lot over the years from our experiments. So that's what really sets this apart, I think, in my mind.
Sure. And just to build on that, I think not only is it meant to really push our distillery forward, But I think these collection of whiskeys, we see it as an opportunity to push American whiskey as a category forward, and because they truly are world-class whiskeys in our eyes, and other people have recognized them as such over time, and so we're proud to be part of just pushing the whole category and the whole industry forward, and I think these whiskeys are a part of that story. So why don't we just jump in? Why don't we start with our Eagle Rare 17 year?
Fantastic.
Yeah, so guys, I'm looking at this, and I think a lot of folks that are watching love to learn how to taste. And is there any significance to the order that you guys are going to taste in today? Any tips for us?
Yeah, I usually look at it, it's the blender's preference. So it's up to me. But generally the way I approach it, which is not the same maybe for everybody. Everybody has different tastes and thresholds of flavor, etc. But I like to divide it up. We're going to start off with the lower proof products, and then we have basically two. One is 90 proof and one is 101 proof. And then you get into the uncut, unfiltered three that we have. So we actually have 3 uncut, unfiltered and 3 at lower proof, so we'll start off with that. And generally, I like to go from, say, a rye bourbon to more flavorful product like a straight rye because of the rye and the spiciness. Whereas here, I start off with the wheat because that's usually softer. And here, I have the Handy next and then the Stagg because, in my opinion, the Stagg has the complexity that I like and I'd like to enjoy last, and it's very strong in terms of flavor. So some people may prefer to have the Handy last, but for me as a blender, I prefer this type of order. So,
great.
Sounds great. So we're about to get into our Eagle Rare 17 year. So this is obviously part of our Eagle Rare brand as well, and it showcases what the Eagle Rare brand can be as well as the antique collection. This year's release was actually put into the barrel. The whiskey in this bottle were put into the barrel in 2002, bottled in 2020. So this is actually an 18-year-old product. So it's certainly plenty of age. So once again, think about the time capsule that is in this bottle. This started its life in 2002, really just 2 years after we had launched the antique collection. And oh my, how much has changed in our lives in the last 18 years. But this is a 101 proof. It's 101 proof because it sort of pays tribute to the original proof of the Eagle Rare brand, which is 101 proof. That brand was launched in 1975. But I'm excited to get into this. So Drew, tell us what we're about to experience here.
Well, one thing real quick. Stuart Ray on Eagle Rare's Facebook page must have known that fun fact. He says, why was the Eagle Rare 17 not renamed ER 18 this year? So somebody knew that fact. So Stuart Ray, he's on top of it.
Yeah, typically it's a 17-year-old product, and this year the barrels are just a little bit older, and so we just wanted the consistency.
Well, one thing you got to remember is age is one characteristic. It's the flavor and the taste that's important. So this particular one was picked from Warehouse P on the first floor. So what that means is it may take a little bit longer time to get to where we want in terms of taste profile. And so there was only 59-60% lost to evaporation on this. So what that means is it didn't age as fast as you might expect, so it needed a little bit more, that I thought, and that's one of the reasons that it's a little bit older. Even though you could release it at 17, this is the best age for this product.
And then typically in something this old, we'd have even more evaporation loss, because you say 60,
right,
around 59-60%.
Usually it's higher.
That's a lot of loss.
Yes,
but usually it's even higher. So,
right. So you have to take all those things into account. It's not about age necessarily, other than when it's age claim, but it could be taking longer. And actually sometimes less, but we can't because it's claimed the age. So let's nose this one first. And when I like to nose very lightly to get the top notes. And you can gently enter your nose into the glass and have some fun, because you can see all kinds of different flavors. And I like to keep my mouth a little bit open just so you can circulate the vapors, the aromas, through the whole nasal passage. And this one is just glorious, and I'm sure everybody on the internet right now is just envious of us.
Smells great.
Wow. you get these, to me this year, I get a lot of ripe cherries. I get like a vanilla, like a Dunkaroo type nose. It's that vanilla cake-like frosting. You get some baking spices and maybe a little bit of brown sugar. It's so rich. And Eagle Rare has always one that really hasn't got a lot of press just because of the strength of these other products. But this is absolutely a fantastic bourbon in my view. And so when we taste, let's swirl it around the palate. And it's telling you a story. When it first enters, there's a beginning to it. And then as it transitions across the palate, it's like the middle of the story. And then the finish is like the end of the story. So every time you taste, when you first taste it, you get a lot of caramel, coffee, dark fruit notes. Oh man.
It's so luxurious.
It's silky too on
just
mouthfeel.
nuanced and refined, and the mouthfeel is just this creamy sort of viscous.
Buttery.
Absolutely.
And so you get the finish. You get a lot of oak on the very end of it, which means to me it's balanced very nicely. Because if it was too oaked, it would be all oak right away.
Sure.
And you can see how it transitions from that dark fruit to that pepperiness, almost a cotton candy, leather, and then finally to the dryness of the oak. So an excellent whiskey. You'll be lucky to taste. So
yeah, I love when you taste something that's sold. You know, it's just hard for a product to, to be this good at this age. You know, it has to age gracefully. I think we said that last time, but
right.
It really does. And the tannins and the oak doesn't really hit until the back of the palate. And
right.
So you get all the goodness.
But that's a sign of a great whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was all oak right away, I wouldn't say it's that good. So we watch what we pick in terms of barrels to give us that balance that you taste there.
Sure.
It's absolutely fantastic.
All right. So let's move on to the next one. So we're going to move next to our Sazerac 18-year-old rye. So this is not a bourbon. We're switching from a rye bourbon mash bill, which is a bourbon, to a new class of whiskey, a rye whiskey, a straight rye. And this is also put in the barrel in the year 2002. So they're about the same age this year. Normally Sazerac 18-year-old is our oldest expression of the antique collection. And, this might be the oldest rye whiskey in the market that's produced and released year in and year out. I don't know of many examples, other examples that come close to this, but it's going to be a different taste experience. But once again, that time in the barrel does some amazing things.
Just remember, all these are made they're aged in a brand new oak barrel. So it's not like a cognac or a Scotch or a Canadian whiskey. 18 years in Kentucky is a long time, and the maturity is fantastic. This one here was aged on the 3rd floor in Warehouse K, and we lost 76% due to evaporation. So you're concentrating all those flavors into this product. And so you think that you have a barrel full of whiskey, by the time 18 years come, you've got probably 25% or less.
Sure.
So just think of that. That's amazing to me.
It is.
And so
this one's 90 proof.
This one's 90 proof, yes. So on the nose, you get that candied apple. You get
100%.
Rye spiciness in a sophisticated, gentle way. It's not piercing to the nose. And that's the beauty of this, is it's rich and luxurious on nose for a straight rye. It's absolutely, you might even pick up a note of a mint or spearmint. It's refreshing to me on the nose when it circulates.
100%. And I go right to the fair. Candy apple is exactly where I go.
And then when you taste it, wow. You get dark chocolate. You get that spiciness, that baking spice. You get those cherry notes coming through, the buttery, luxurious mouthfeel. It'll rival any fantastic cognac on the market. It's sophisticated, And I think that maturity is really adding to that complexity. You get a coffee note maybe on the finish. You definitely get some oak because of the 18 years in a barrel. And a little bit of that spiciness. It reminds me of Christmas again, that holiday spice. That's a fabulous, fabulous straight rye.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Mandy Olson just
Yep.
put a comment on Facebook, and she says it's just so crazy. All these flavors just come out of an oak barrel, like they're all so different. So maybe talk a little bit about how that's happening. Is it just age, but a lot of it's the mash bill as well. So in the blending world, how are you capturing so many different flavors for these 5?
That's why I'm a blender. But there's so many reasons, from how you cook it to the raw materials to the mash bill, as you say. For instance, the mash bill, Eagle Rare is a rye bourbon, so majority of this is corn, whereas a straight rye like Sazerac is actually a majority of rye. So now you've switched that around, so the predominant characteristic will be rye on a straight rye versus corn on a rye bourbon. And then when you get into a wheated bourbon, when that mash bill, there's no rye. So it's a different, you don't get that rye spiciness. You get spiciness like other spices, but not the rye spiciness. Wheat is softer, so it's smoother. And so if you like that style, you're going to get a different taste profile. And then when you age it and the proof, there's so many other variables that change the taste and how it feels on the palate and how it tastes. You could go into an hour of discussion on how the taste change based on all these different components.
I mean, this is the beautiful thing about, bourbon and rye and just American whiskey is the barrel. I mean, the magic,
Yes.
So much of the magic is in the barrel. It's a natural product, a natural process, and created, partly by nature. The barrel accounts for 100% of the color, of the whiskey in this bottle, and well over half the flavor. And, those sweet aromatics, the vanillas, the caramels, all the things that we love, comes from that barrel, and no two barrels are alike. So it's just, there's just so many aspects to making an amazing whiskey, but it's part art, part science, part nature. It's really
Well, I think you're wrong.
Oh, okay.
The most important thing is the blender.
Oh,
No, I'm
okay.
just kidding. No, actually, it's important. Everybody from the distiller right through to the person who marries, the blends it together is important. And that's what makes these products great, is all the people involved with this process.
Yeah. Well, Drew, you mentioned wheated bourbon, so why don't we head on over to
Sure.
William Larue Weller. So this is obviously part of our Weller brand, which is wheated bourbon. It's our wheated bourbon mash bill. So there's no rye in this. This is corn, wheat, malted barley. This is a 12-plus-year-old product. So this was put in the barrel in 2008. And now we're getting into the uncut, unfiltered. So this year's release, there's no water added to this. So this year's release is 134.5 proof, which is the highest proof of the entire lineup this year.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, William Larue Weller was part of the original antique collection, but it changed a little bit over time. So I think it was about 2005 when William Larue Weller was added into the lineup as a uncut, unfiltered, wheated bourbon option. So I'm excited to get into this one.
Yeah, and this one here was selected from 2 warehouses, INC on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors. So there's another variable for flavor changes, is by selecting from different warehouses on different floors, you get different taste profiles. Because every barrel is different, as you said, and location is a big factor in changing the flavor. So this one here is quite complex because of that, and we lost over 73% due to evaporation.
So sad.
All that the Angels get to enjoy.
Oh, good for them.
So this is a wheated bourbon, so there's no rye, like you said. The main grain is corn. Wheat is the second grain, and then barley malt, but no rye. So what that does is the wheat is a softer grain, so this one should be much softer, especially on nose, and less obtrusive. So let's smell this one. You get all those caramel notes. You get vanilla.
Agreed.
The softness, you don't get that tingle from the rye spiciness. when you taste it, wow, you get those figs, dates, raisins, red fruits, complexity. Wow. And then as it transitions, you get that dry oak flavor, tobacco, and leather notes. And we consistently get a lot of awards for these products, but this one especially. And I think part of it is the softness of the wheat and how it marries so it's more approachable for some people, depending on the person, obviously.
Yeah, it's you know, our wheated bourbon mash bill. I'm such a big fan of it. You know, I think what it does is, you know, rye is this a pretty bold grain and pretty bold flavor, and it adds a lot of complexity. But it you know, it's pretty big. When you take that out and you put wheat instead, you get you get the taste of the barrel more front and center. The caramels and the vanillas. On the front of my palate, I got like this caramel chew, you know, and you know, there's also something different about this one. There's a lower barrel entry proof and a lower distillation proof, and I think that sort of leads into that sort of mouthfeel experience and softens the whiskey up, as you said earlier.
Yeah, when you lower the proof into the barrel, it takes longer to mature. It'll be aging longer, so that's part of the reason we let this go. But it's a beautiful whiskey. I really recommend this one highly.
So we're moving on to the Thomas H. Handy. It's a straight rye whiskey. Maybe talk about the differences between the Sazerac and the Thomas Handy.
Yeah, and Drew, we were talking about this a little earlier. I love these two in the collection because they both dial up one aspect or one sort of product attribute. One really dials up the proof, which the Thomas Handy does, which we're about to get into. That one's 129 proof, uncut, unfiltered. The Sazerac 18 is lower proof, 90 proof, but it's 18 years old. It's much older. The Thomas Handy is just 6 years old. And so it sort of, when you taste them side by side, you get a sense for what age does to a whiskey and then what proof does to a whiskey. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's the same mash bill, so that's the first point. The second point is the maturity. As something matures longer, the complexity increases. So you're going to see a lot more of those dark fruits, as an example, the figs, the chocolate notes, whereas something that's around 6 or 7 years is going to be lively and really hit your palate, especially if it's uncut, unfiltered, because it'll basically explode on your palate. The flavors will explode. So there's quite a difference between the two. It's like me being old, that's like the 18. Mature, complex. And somebody young like yourself, Josh, would be more like that, vibrant and spicy. And that's the way I look at it. I
like that. That's good.
Yeah, Bourbon Bites on, looks like Buffalo Trace Distillery Facebook page says, I managed to get a Thomas Handy last year and it was fantastic.
Yes, it'll blow your mind. And being only 6 to 7 years, based on the barrels we pick, a fabulous whiskey. And I think anybody who enjoys a straight rye will love Thomas Handy.
Yeah, and I always say for us, you know, it's just a great example that age isn't everything. Age can do some amazing things when it's done right for whiskeys, but you know, our whiskey here at Buffalo Trace Distillery really starts to sing at 6 years old. I think once you get into 6 years old, it starts to sing, and fun things happen after that.
Yeah, and this one here, just because it's 6 to 7, only 32% was lost to evaporation. So it shows you the difference of the aging. It's not as concentrated. But because it's almost 130 proof, it still explodes on your palate, the flavors. And that's the beauty of this. All those fatty acids and esters tend to stick on your tongue and stay there and linger forever. And that's one of the beauties of the uncut, unfiltered, in my view. And so this one here we actually got from 3 warehouses, N, M, and K, on the 3rd, 5th, and 9th floor. And it's around 6 years and 2 months. So really, on the nose, you get a lot of floral notes right from the get-go.
I get floral and I get stone fruit.
You get that stone fruit, candied cream, spiciness, definitely tingles on the nose. I like that peppery. And when you taste it, Wow, you get that baking spice, maybe a touch of orange peel, honey notes, the candied sweetness that comes through on the Thomas Handy, and the transition, and then as it goes from the front of your palate to the back of your palate, you get those black pepper spicy notes from the rye. Maybe a touch of licorice, depending on what you see. Do you see some of that, maybe?
Yeah, it's you always get this. I always get this peppery thing, but I also get this juxtaposition between the pepper toward the back end,
yes,
and this fresh spearmint type thing
right
on the front end, which makes it a lot of fun. And to your point, it's so big and bold, but still nuanced and a lot of fun. But it's not, coming from William Larue Weller, it's not a soft, So
no, it's not soft.
Even though slightly lower proof than William Larue Weller this year, it tastes bigger in a sense.
Yeah, and when you finish tasting, you keep tasting. I mean, it lingers forever because of the uncut, unfiltered. It's all those fatty acids cling to your tongue, and the flavors just hover there. So I still taste it, still tastes fantastic. We could end it right there.
Ricky Perry says
Yes.
on Buffalo Trace Distillery's Facebook page, he basically says, "Is it 5 o'clock yet? I need to go get some." So I think you're watering some palates as you're walking through the lineup.
Another thing as we're going through this that I love about the antique collection is it really showcases, a lot of our variety here at the distillery. Not only from a whiskey standpoint, so we're tasting three of our different mash bills. Our BT1 rye, our sort of flagship rye bourbon mash bill. That's Eagle Rare 17-year and George T. Stagg. We're tasting our wheated bourbon mash bill, which is, Weller and Van Winkle. And then we're tasting our straight rye mash bill, which is our standard Sazerac Rye, our Sazerac 18, our Thomas H. Haney, which is part of the Sazerac family. And also you get a variety of our brands and the people that have been involved in our history and the history of bourbon and part of our story. So, William Larue Weller starting W.L. Weller and Sons in 1849 to George T. Stagg, who, partnered with E.H. Taylor here at the distillery, and, it was the George T. Stagg Distillery on up to, Sazerac, which is, rich in our company's history, to obviously Eagle Rare, which was, has been around since the 70s. So it's just it's a great lineup for many different reasons.
And to the last one.
So you said early on you wanted George T. Stagg at the end. So
just like his personality, it's fantastic. It was back when he was here owning the distillery. It's bold, robust, flavorful, powerful whiskey, complexity to the nth degree.
So George T. Stagg, uncut, unfiltered. It's a rye bourbon. This year is what do we have? 130.4 proof. And this was put in the barrel in the spring of 2005. Obviously, bottled here in 2020. So it's a 15-year-old product. Amazing things happen in those barrels for 15 years.
So 3 different warehouses, K, L, and Q. 3 different floors, 1, 2, and 9. So you see the variety, and you're going to get variety of flavors there. And that's critical to make a great product as far as I'm concerned, especially something with this complexity. So on the nose, you'll get one of the most complex noses. I can give this whiskey to 100 people. They'll give me different descriptors every time. But typically you get that cigar box, chocolate nose, definitely some cherries like those red fruits. Definitely some oak because of 15, 16 years in a barrel. And when we taste it, wow, really complex, dark fruits, figs, dates, chocolate, cream. It's just almost everything, cinnamon. And as it transitions, you get more of that, more of those dark cherries, chocolate, cigar box notes. Maybe some leather because of the 15 years. Really start to see that.
Oh, gosh, that's so good.
And transitions to the oak, to the mid-palate, to the back. And then the dryness. And it just hovers there.
True. I tasted it 30 seconds ago. And then all of a sudden this tasting note just hit me. I mean, it literally just stays there and camps out. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and part of the reason this one is last is exactly for that reason. So even though the rye is really robust, this dominates, in my view, as far as taste.
Yeah. And a fun story about George T. Stagg. So, we had launched the Antique Collection 2000 with three expressions. George T. Stagg wasn't a part of that.
Yes.
Well, we had a consumer suggest that we introduced a barrel proof whiskey as part of that collection because we didn't have that. And so we thought that was a great idea, obviously before my time, but we thought that was a great idea. And then we actually went to a bunch of Buffalo Trace Distillery retirees, to a group of them, and said, what should the profile of this whiskey be for this new barrel proof whiskey? And they're the ones that came up with this 15-year-old, rye bourbon mash bill, the profile for George T. Stagg. And needless to say, what a great call that was. They knew what they were doing because it's, since then, I think year in and year out, it's viewed as not only a perennial favorite amongst the collection, which they're kind of all our favorites because we love them all for different reasons, but I think it's probably won as many awards as anything in this collection, and probably one of the most highly awarded whiskeys, any kind of whiskey in the world, year in and year out. And so it's kind of a fun story how it came to be. So it was introduced into the collection in 2002, I believe. So.
Yeah, it's an amazing lineup, and obviously we have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions on Facebook across the Eagle Rare channels, the Weller channels, the Buffalo Trace Distillery channels, and a lot has to do with being able to buy these bottles. And so we know there's a big expansion going on here at the distillery. So does that include expanding more production on these whiskeys as well?
Yeah, great question. So, we said it before, but we're spending $1.2 billion over a 10-year period to expand capacity here at the distillery. And so what does that mean? That means, more cookers, more fermenters, more a bigger distillation capacity, more bottling, more aging warehouses, and, more of everything, every step of the process, which means ultimately more whiskey. So we're making more of all of it, which includes the antique collection.
But just remember, 18 years, be patient.
Absolutely. If we didn't put, in Saz 18's case, if we didn't put it in the barrel in 2002, we don't have it for this year. So there's just a big lag. There's no microwave for this industry, which is fine because that's what makes it so special.
Yeah, right.
But we're working on it.
Yeah, that's great. And again, we always try to keep this, a big tasting like this around 30 minutes. I know you're both very busy, so if there's any last words, we're happy to hear from you. Again, there's a ton of questions here, but I just don't think we're going to get to them all. But any last words from either one of you?
No, we just have a lot to finish up before we go, so.
Yeah, hopefully you guys have an opportunity to try some of these. Go, build relationships with your local bottle shops or find your local whiskey bar. And if you see this, encourage you to give it a shot. And thanks for tuning in.
See you next time.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.